Sometime last year, I was scrolling through the Barnes & Noble's upcoming newly released section, and I had come across something I had never expected to actually see. The first English release of Killing Stalking. You may know what Killing Stalking is, or you may be completely lost. And if you're asking me, well, what is Killing Stalking? To you I reply, buckle up. This is going to be a ride. Stalking was originally released to an online platform called Lezen. Lezen was commonly known for their BL works. You could be asking me at this moment, what is BL? And BL is an acronym for the phrase boys love. Boys love is commonly known as yaoi and was adopted into Western media around the 90s. And BL is just commonly known as porn. It's basically just gay porn, but drawn, and it's very influenced towards the female market, which is why a lot of people have problems with it. But yeah, was kind of like webtoon, but more in the fact that you could post more adult content. It was commonly known for smut, for whatever you associate. Mostly smut. It was very smut driven. And in November of 2016, Lezen completely changed. This came after the release of Killing Stalking. Having the differentialities between Killing Stalking and the other comics or manhwas on this website quickly made it gain notoriety. But in the way the notoriety wasn't exactly how it was intended. This is when we quick cut to Yoonbum. Yoonbum is a 20-something-year-old man who is enrolled in a college in South Korea. We're first introduced to Yoonbum as he is trying to break into another man's home. This is when we quick cut to Songwo. Songwo is a man, also in his 20s, but a few years younger than Yoonbum. Songwo is commonly described as charismatic, attractive, a good student, a good partner. He seems to the outside world to be the complete man, the man everybody wants. But this facade is quickly broken as we're formally introduced to him breaking the shit out of Yoonbum's legs. He does this after Yoonbum discovers his secret of kidnapping and murdering women. So that's charming. After Songwo completely breaks the shit out of Yoonbum's legs, he falls down the stairs as one does. What ends up happening is right before Songwo actually beats the shit out of Yoonbum and kills him, Yoonbum declares that he's in love with Songwo. What happens here is we get an explanation about the mandatory Korean military service that Songwo and Yoonbum had to do. So Yoonbum was known to be frail. He's very obviously malnourished. He's very obviously mentally ill. There's a lot going on. But they still made him do the military service. So he ended up becoming a target practice for a lot of the other men in the military. And in this one instance, Yoonbum was actually about to be raped by a couple of the other military men before Songwo had come up and intervened and stopped the situation. This is when Yoonbum gained this terrible infatuation with Songwo. He almost saw him in this savior light, that he had fallen in love and he needed to go back to Songwo because Songwo had saved him. And that's where our twisted spiderweb officially starts. Our next scene officially opens to Yoonbum waking up from the incident from before, but he is lying next to the woman that he discovered before. But this time, the woman is dead. This leads to Yunbum screaming, which makes sense. He woke up next to a mutilated corpse. Songwo then comes down the stairs from the basement and makes a comment that he murdered the woman because she wouldn't shut the fuck up, that she just kept screaming and it was annoying. And then he starts force-feeding Yunbum some sort of porridge, like genuinely force-feeding him. And as he's force-feeding him, Songwo asks him, "How do you feel about outliving this woman?" And Yunbum says, "I feel good. He feels good that he's alive." And Songwo then calls him a sick fuck before open mouth kissing this dude. So then Yunbum is like, he's thinking, like, this is what couples do. Like, kissing is what couples do. So that makes me and Songwo a couple. So in the next scene, we're open to the fact that it's been presumably about a week or so. Yunbum is still down in the basement, and for some reason, Sangwo is doing push-ups next to Yunbum's body. Then he starts to berate Yunbum about how it's been a week and how he's been force-feeding him and how he's still skinny and how it's not fun to kill people when they're skinny because there's no fat on their body. So then what he ends up doing is showing the fact that he hates to kill skinny people. He takes a can lid and he cuts Yunbum's collarbones open. To this, Yunbum is arguably terrified and he ends up wetting himself. This is when Yunbum is begrudgingly taken upstairs by Sangwo to be force showered. As he had dehumanized Yunbum just enough by giving him the clothes of the woman Yunbum just woke up next to, Songwo poses the idea that Yunbum can stay upstairs as long as he doesn't pass the start of the stairs and that he acts like a mother. He does the cooking, he does the cleaning, he just takes care of the home. And Yunbum agrees because that's better than staying in a basement for his whole life. So then Sangwo does what any crazy person would do and stares down Yunbum the entire time he does the cooking and the cleaning. This is kind of like Sangwo giving Yunbum a test. He's waiting for Yunbum to fuck up. And inevitably, Yunbum does fuck up. He drops a plate and Sangwo beats the absolute ever-loving shit out of him. And that just seems to be normal for them. And Yunbum's okay with it. So when he's upstairs, Yunbum is forced to eat off of the floor, off of this small table, off of the floor, and that's where he eats because he can't be humanized enough to sit at the table. And Yunbum is still being stared down by Songwo. As they eat, as Yunbum cleans, he is constantly being stared down, and this starts to make him anxious, makes him paranoid, rightfully so. After Sangwo beats the ever-loving shit out of Yunbum, he ends up giving him a task to clean out a few, storage shelves in the laundry room, just to get rid of anything that was broken or old or dirty. So that's what Yunbum starts doing. As he's going through the shelves, he finds a bottle of rat poison. And this is where he gains the idea to slip the poison into Sangwoo's food. A hit and run type situation. But this just so happens to be the night that Sangwo invites Yunbum to eat at the dinner table with him. And right as Sangwo is about to take a bite of the food, he looks at Yunbum and he goes, "Well, I think you should go first. I want to see you enjoy it." So that's what Yunbum is forced to do. He's forced to eat the food that he knows is filled with rat poison. This literally leads to Yunbum passing out and getting sick. He ends up violently vomiting, and Sangwo finds him on the floor. So then Sangwo is about to take Yunbum into the basement once more before getting a just a tiny ounce of humility, and he brings Yunbum upstairs, and he lets him sleep on Sangwoo's bed. This is mistaken by Yunbum as an act of love, an act of kindness, when in reality, Sangwoo didn't want to lose his toy. He didn't want to lose the person that was so forth supplying him such entertainment and just being a human punching bag. Yunbum actually wakes up to the fact that Sangwoo has brought another person into the home. They're screaming because they just been kidnapped, and Sangwoo puts them in the basement, and instead of Yunbum doing anything, Yunbum goes back to sleep. He wakes up once more, and Sangwoo is sitting in front of him. This is when he tells Yunbum that he kind of looks like his mother, which is going to be needed for later. That should be kept in the back of your mind. And that the table that Yunbum is forced to eat off of was actually the same table that his father forced him and his mother to eat off of every night. And this is when we get let in on the fact that Sangwoo grew up in a very abusive home, that his father was very emotionally and physically abusive towards his mother, and that he was often caught in the crossfire. This is then when Yunbum gives the same solidarity to Sangwoo and opens to the fact that, he was also physically abused, and he's also frequently sexually abused by his uncle. And that's when Sangwoo basically tells Yunbum that he doesn't care, and that he doesn't tolerate broken people, and that he needs to fix whatever he did because he's not dealing with a broken person. Which is so comforting if you think about it. This is when the lines of the stories start to get trajectively blurred. Sangwoo basically rapes Yunbum, but not in the way you would expect, because Yunbum does go along with it, but the issue is the power dynamic. There is such a terrible power dynamic between these two men that Yunbum saw it as this was love, that they're dating, and that this is, what couples do. Couples have sex. This is normal. But to Sangwoo, Yunbum is just a sex toy. He's nothing more than that. He's nothing more than a mommy-shaped sex toy, which once again comes in handy later on. Later in the story, we come to the plot point that Sangwoo is going to run some errands. He tells Yunbum that he'll be back in a while and that he trusts him not to leave. So then, what does Yunbum do? He takes the option that he has and he tries to run for freedom. He gets dressed in his old clothes and he starts crawling towards the door. What ends up happening is right before he crosses the threshold of the stairs, he starts panicking. He starts weighing his pros and his cons of staying with Sangwoo. That, yes, he may be held captive and not have a social life, but at the same time, it's still better than being physically and sexually abused by his uncle. So he ends up weighing his options to the point that he gives himself a panic attack. He ends up passing out, and he ends up waking up, freaking out, wondering if Sangwoo had come home. He had not. Yunbum then gains the courage and he opens the front door. Sangwoo had never left. Sangwoo was sitting on the porch. Sangwoo was testing Yunbum, and Yunbum failed. And this is when Yunbum starts dramatically pleading for his life. He starts pleading to Sangwoo that, he loves him, he will do anything, he's sorry, just trying to make up for what he did. Sangwoo doesn't even give him the chance. Yunbum then starts to crawl down the front porch stairs. He starts crawling into the street. He starts screaming for help, screaming for someone to help him. And this is when Sangwoo starts to mock Yunbum. He starts screaming too. Someone come help him. Someone help. And then he starts laughing. Yunbum is still desperately pleading, trying to find anyone to help him. No one came. And this is when Sangwoo tells Yunbum, no one's going to come for him. This is the bad neighborhood. No one's gonna come for Yunbum. No one even lives there anymore. Picks up Yunbum. They walk down to the basement. And this is where literally probably one of the most disturbing horror pieces I have ever seen unfolds. He weighs the options between using some sort of fishing hook and some sort of knife to completely open up Yunbum before he chokes him and he hangs him from the ceiling. And just a bunch of like Saw level just horror acts take place. It's terrible. It's disturbing. And that's what this story is. Terrible and disturbing. The end of book 1 starts with just the most terrible forms of torture towards Yunbum. Songwo then goes to a gay bar. Even after he has stated he's not gay, he went to a gay bar. And this is where he picks up some random man. He ends up putting the man in the basement, to which Yunbum is now back being accustomed to. And basically makes Yunbum kill this man as a form of another test. Songwo brings this other man back and basically makes them play a sick card game. And basically just makes Yunbum kill this man. Songwo basically gaslights Yunbum into believing that he's the reason that this man died. That Yunbum is the one that moved the knife and stabbed this man, when in fact Songwo was moving Bum's body to stab this other man. And this is where Songwo congratulates Yunbum. He says, "Oh, this is your first kill. Congratulations." And that's where book 1 ends. But that's not where the story ends. What follows this murder of the man leads to what presumes some of the readers of Killing Stalking to ship these men together. They end up going on this trip and they go and hide this man's body in the forest. So this is actually editing me. I was wrong. They didn't go hide the man's body. There was actually another plot point in which Sangwoo got invited to go to like a party with his friends, and there was this girl that was interested in him, and he ended up making Yunbum kill her. So this trip was actually them going to hide her body, not the man's body. Okay, thank you. And this is where it kind of, the lines start to get blurrier between both Songwo and Yunbum. A lot of Songwo's actions towards Yunbum start to become more, they start to become like loving in a sick sense. Like that's how it's panned out to be. But in actuality, Songwo's a very sick man. He too has some sort of mental illness, and that's very prevalent. The rest of the book is basically Yunbum assisting Songwo through murdering multiple people. This basically is like Yunbum proving to Songwo that he loves him. He ends up aiding in, I believe, about 4 more murders, and the aiding and hiding the bodies. But during the first book and through the rest of the story, there actually is a police officer that is hot on Songwo's case. Not mentioned before, but Songwo's parents are both dead. And it is rumored that Songwo is the cause for both of his parents' death, which isn't fully true. We end up learning that Sangwo's mother ended up killing his father with the same rat poison that Yunbum tried to kill him with, which is why he was aware of the fact that there was rat poison in the food. We then learn that during that same time, Sangwo's mother became extremely paranoid and became concerned that Sangwo was going to kill her or go to the cops. So she opted to attack him. He then, in self-defense, attacked her and killed his mother. The same police officer that believes that Sangwo killed his parents is really trying to get him arrested for it. He also knows that Sangwo is the reason there were so many missing people and so many murders taking place so frequently. At some point, he does end up getting Sangwo and Yunbam into the police station. To this point, basically, Sangwo basically tells them that, oh yeah, no, this is my boyfriend and you're homophobic for thinking that we killed someone. And Yunbam goes along with it. Sangwo just said that he was his boyfriend and he starts agreeing to everything Sangwo is saying. Which is arguably genius of Sangwo. I don't want to give him credit, but honestly, pulling the homophobia card is honestly genius. It's kind of really smart, and the whole police, all of them felt bad, like, oh no, we're not homophobic. So he ended up letting all of them go, and basically all of their charges got dropped. None of them were charged for anything, because Sangwo pulled the homophobia card. It's genius. It's revolutionary, if I'm being honest. Then, with the same police officer, basically, he gets a walkthrough of Sangwo's house and doesn't find anything because Sangwo's been murdering for a very long time. He's very aware of how to get away with it, and he does. So then, at some point, the police officer gets into a fight with Sangwo, and Sangwo loses grip of a knife and basically tells Yunbam, kill him, kill the police officer. And Yunbam is so terrified that he doesn't kill the police officer. And this is when Sangwo was so shocked that he tells Yunbam he doesn't need him anymore and that he can do this on his own. So as they're fighting, the police officer and Sangwo, they end up knocking into the gas stove, so the gas starts fuming through the kitchen. The police officer then lights a match or a lighter, and the house ends up setting ablaze. Our story then ends with Sangwo, Sangwo dying. Sangwo's in a completely different hospital than Yunbam, and Yunbam ends up getting out of the hospital and starts searching for Sangwo, because Sangwo's the only person he knows. He's the only person he trusts. So he goes looking for Sangwo. He ends up going to the hospital where he was, and he ends up learning that Sangwo got smothered to death. He started mumbling so incoherently, calling out for Yunbam, that an old woman went to Sangwo and suffocated him. Which then ties back to a phrase Sangwo's mother had told him, that she wishes that he would die a slow and painful death. And that's what happened. He died a horrible way, which is how he should. He was a terrible person. But this doesn't mean Yunbam got to escape freely either. Yunbam ends up leaving the hospital, still freaked out and, worried. Sangwo's dead. What is he going to do? And he ends up seeing a man that he believes is Sangwo. And he ends up running into traffic. And he ends up dying. And that's the story of killing Stalking. In the beginning of the story, I had mentioned that killing Stalking had gained notoriety for the wrong reason. It wasn't recognized as a story with psychological and horror brilliance, because that's what this book is. I want to give all the notoriety to Killing Stalking. It absolutely is disturbing, and it does exactly what it was supposed to come across as. But going back to the form of media it was on, Lezen. Lezen was known for BL, for gay stories, for gay romance. So a lot of Killing Stalking got marketed as a psychological romance, a dark romance, gay and dark and romance, and that's how it was targeted. But what Sangwoo and Yoonbum had wasn't love. That wasn't love. That was obsession. There was no sort of form of affection or true love coming from either of them. It was straight up, it was obsession, and that's all it really was. And you may be asking me, why is this book so important? And for me, explaining that to you, all I really have to say is, Killing Stalking, now that it is fully published and is being, sold in Barnes & Noble, I actually went with my best friend and we both got a copy because we had both read Killing Stalking. The issue with this is that Killing Stalking is now going to come back prevalent into the media. Killing Stalking has never left relevance in the media, but it is going to bring back its toxic tropes. The only thing that I could see that could be seen as romance is probably like not even four, they did have a lot of sex in this book, but it was basically statutory rape. There's too big of a power dynamic between both of them for this to ever be a consenting sexual relationship. Even at the end of the book, when, they started having this more domestic lifestyle, Yoonbum was still actively afraid of Sangwoo. There was no equal level playing field. And I think that's what gets missed by a lot of the readers, is a lot of people go into this and expect a horror romance, and they don't see it past the surface level. And I think that causes a lot of the main issues with this story. And that's what I want this segment of the story to be. Who were Killing Stalking's fans? Who was the audience? Doing a quick Google search, I came across those extra questions that people ask, and it was, what's the right age to be reading Killing Stalking? And very obviously it said 18 plus, and that makes sense based off of the content of the book. But then further searching, I found a Reddit about only Killing Stalking. It's solely about Killing Stalking. And someone had asked on the Reddit, what is the about age that you started reading Killing Stalking, and what's the best age to read it? The comments were filled with a bunch of people who are saying they started reading it at 11 or 12, which was the same case for me. I was 11 or 12 when I started reading Killing Stalking. But then I decided to go deeper into the Reddit just because that intrigued me. And the Reddit was actually filled with very mature discussion posts about the story, which I was not expecting at all. I was very obviously expecting the romanticization of this story. Sure, there was the one-off fan art or the one-off cosplay, but that's going to happen of any media ever. So I was very taken aback and very surprised actually about the content that was on there, and I'm surprised in a good way, because going back onto Google and searching through Killing Stalking Tumblrs and aminos, If you remember Abino, I am so sorry. But going back onto those things, I was witnessing a lot of romanticization of this story. And that's when I noticed that Tumblr and Amino very obviously have very younger audiences than Reddit does. And I think that also is a telltale sign of the people, on these accounts. The people that were on Reddit were obviously older and had grown up reading Killing Stalking, and as they got older, they were starting to adopt mature views on the story, and that makes sense. But then on Tumblr and Amino, it was younger people, which is very obvious, and these people had less mature opinions on it. More people were asking, is Yoonbum and Sangwoo in love? Are they dating? Is Yoonbum dead? Which, yeah, he is. But that is I feel like that gives an eye-opening existence into this group, or I don't even want to call them a fandom. But the fandom of Killing Stalking, I have noticed that especially when it comes to the younger audience, it very much has that immature feel to it, which makes sense. These are younger children, they haven't experienced much, they're still very immature and ignorant, and that's okay, they're acting their age. But that's where the line, I feel like, should get drawn. I feel like Killing Stalking, which is so counterintuitive because I was also a preteen reading Killing Stalking, but I feel like Killing Stalking should have been harder to access. I feel like it shouldn't be as easy to access to younger children. And that makes sense to me. Like, I have an 11-year-old stepsister, and I would be absolutely fucking mortified if I found out that she was reading Killing Stalking. And I feel like that's the view everybody has taken onto it, which, again, makes sense. Doing another quick Google search, I came to the percentage that 62.7% of Killing Stalking readers were female. And they were females in their early teens and early 20s. So, a large gap. And that led me to wonder, why is the audience predominantly female? And my mind went to two things. Women being more interested in BL, and women being interested in true crime. So then that led me to research, why are women more interested in true crime? And there were two answers that I frequently came across. First being women being interested in it because they want to know how to protect themselves from it, seeming as women are in the larger percentage of being affected by these murders or these kidnappers or rapers or whatever. And then the other thing was that women were more interested in true crime because they are statistically more empathetic than men. And that's when I connected that to Killing Stalking. Seeing a lot of people reading this book kept reading it because they felt bad for Yoonbum. They wanted to see him get away to live happily. And that didn't happen, which is why I think a lot of readers of Killing Stalking end up being very unhappy with the ending, seeming as how the ending was very open-ended. And I think that causes a lot of disruption between the reader and the book, especially between their female audiences. Seeming as how true crime has genuinely exploded in the media over the past few years, there was a 16% raise in true crime Spotify podcasts in 2019, which is coincidentally also the same year that Killing Stalking ended. I'm not saying Killing Stalking caused the true crime phenomenon. I think Killing Stalking was a product of its time. a woman who was interested in true crime created her own true crime story. Not saying that Killing Stalking is based off of true events, but it solidifies women being interested in the dark and the macabre. Reading more into articles about Killing Stalking, I came across a few of the same topics, especially as why people were interested in reading this. And it's that Sang-woo's attractive. I mean, yeah, we all saw how the Tumblr sexy man played out. There's a whole group of them. And usually that attractiveness is seen as a lanky, edgy white boy. And then we get thrown something that's not. We get Sang-woo. And Sang-woo is a stereotypically attractive person. And I think that's what especially attracts the female audience of this book. And I think that is what also attracts the younger audience. And I feel like that does sound kind of backwards, but middle schoolers are just starting to learn about the world, and learning what a conventionally attractive person is definitely hit home to a lot of middle school girls. And seeing Sang-woo and seeing that, oh, he's conventionally attractive, it gets them interested in the book. And obviously Sang-woo being conventionally attractive is a very large part of the book. He wouldn't get away with what he's done if he wasn't as conventionally attractive as he is. Now, I very obviously know that Killing Stalking's market was not supposed to be middle school girls. That's very obvious. This type of content isn't marketed towards children at all. But that doesn't stop children from reading it. I'm evidence of that. Knowing something is wrong attracts younger children to do things, trying to test their limits, trying to feel adult. I think that, this being as dark as it is definitely does attract a younger audience, because children are trying to test their limits. They're trying to figure out what's too much for them. And I think Killing Stalking is definitely a product of its time, especially since 2016 was when the newest generation was starting to get ready access to cell phones. And I can't say that was me. I got my first cell phone in 3rd grade. It has been very evident that children being younger and younger and getting more access to internet is really what is solidifying these younger children getting interested in such dark media. And I heavily believe that if a child had never had a phone or the internet access as young as they did, Killing Stalking would have not been as popular as it was. If my generation wasn't allowed access to the internet as young as we were, Killing Stalking would have never been as popular as it was, seeming as most of its readers were young preteen girls. And I think that definitely explains why a lot of the people who admitted, oh, I was 11, I was 12, doesn't see an issue with it. And I know now, especially I know myself, have been very disturbed at the fact that I was reading such things at such a young age. And I think that is very interesting that at the time we didn't see it as wrong. And as you get older, you start realizing, oh, I definitely shouldn't have been reading that. And this actually goes back to a conversation I had with my best friend as we went to go buy the physical volume of Killing Stalking. And we were talking about how, yeah, we had definitely been reading it way too young. And this is when I had a discrepancy, because I remembered Killing Stalking ending my freshman year of high school, when she told me no, it ended in 2019. We were in 8th grade. And I was like, no, that can't be right. And I had looked it up, and yeah, Killing Stalking had ended in 2019. I was in 8th grade when this book ended, meaning I was way too god young to be reading this. And that's when in my mind it clicked, like, oh, that's terrifying that I was reading Killing Stalking at 11 or 12. And I feel like that's how a lot of readers are, especially now that we have gotten older. When I was first starting to make this video, I was very concerned about what way I would take it. I didn't want this to be an outside perspective, especially as I was part of the people reading this book. And the other videos I had seen on this book have been very informative video essays on what Killing Stalking is. But then I remembered back in 2016, there was and still is a YouTuber, and her name is Aki Dearest. And I used to watch a bunch of her content in middle school, and I remembered that she had made a video on Killing Stalking when it had first come out. And I remember being very intrigued, especially seeing as how I was reading Killing Stalking, and here's another person that I don't want to say I idolized her, but I loved her content a lot, so I wanted to hear her take on it. And watching the video, she had a lot of the same points that I am making now, and it was a lot of this is disturbing and it's a lot, and how, this is going to be a great story, seeming as how the plot was already very, solidified through the first 10 chapters. Killing Stalking knew exactly what it was, and it wasn't going to pretend that it wasn't. I don't quite exactly remember my, feelings watching the video, seeming as it was a very long time ago. And I just remember being very interested, and I think that also accumulates a lot of the people who had read this book. A lot of people had seen it as intriguing, and that's where it kind of started getting its rap, and I think that's how it started getting into younger audiences, is that intrigue. And I think that is terrifying.
Hey, so this is about a week and a half or so after the initial footage that I had recorded. I've been editing it and doing whatnot, but I wanted to make another point. Something that I had come across as I was researching more and editing was why I think it was so heavily marketed to younger kids. Not that it was influenced to be towards younger kids, but how so many younger people had gotten a hold of it. The anime Yuri on Ice. Now, I was a very large fan of Yuri on Ice, an extreme fan of Yuri on Ice, if I'm being honest. I had that shirt from Hot Topic where it was the Instagram post with Victor and Yuri, and I had the other two Hot Topic shirts, and I still have a Yuri on Ice blanket because I'm not going to get rid of it, and I still have a Yuri on Ice poster, literally from 6th grade. Not the point. But I noticed in a lot of the articles and commentary videos that I was watching as I kept editing was that a lot of people had switched from the Yuri on Ice fandom straight into the Killing Stalking fandom, which doesn't really make sense because a lot of people would be oh yeah, Killing if you liked Yuri on Ice, you'll love Killing Stalking, which doesn't correlate at all. That is such a different change in everything. Yuri on Ice could barely be considered a BL in general, and Killing Stalking is about murder and rape. So I don't know how we got to that conclusion in 2015, but we made that conclusion. That's it.
I feel like if I keep talking about this, I'm gonna run myself in circles. So I'm going to try and wrap it up now. And I think the one thing I want people to leave this video with is that killing stalking is definitely not what you would expect it to be. And I know the name is literally Killing Stalking, and there's very little you can infer about the title. But I genuinely do believe that this story it's really good. And I think that Killing Stalking, like I said, absolutely knows what it is. Killing Stalking has never for 1 second questioned what it is or what it could be. And I think that's what makes it such an amazing story. It it doesn't shy away from what it is. And I think even with the people who surrounded it, people who are reading it, the people who are making the fan art, I've seen some very disturbing fan art. And not disturbing in a gory way, disturbing in like a shippy way. And I think if Killing Stalking didn't have the fandom that it did, I feel like more people would recognize it in what it is. Absolute horror genius. And I really hope that it starts to get the recognition that it is, especially now that the book is published in English, because before it was only published in Korean, Chinese, Japanese, and I think Italian. And I think, now that it's in English, it'll gain more traction, especially since English is a larger language. And I hope that it starts getting recognized for what it is. An absolutely batshit fucking crazy story, but in the most endearing way that I could put that. Thank you for watching this video, and thank you for staying as long as you did. I have no clue how long this video is. I really want people, I hope people will comment their own, views on this story. I just really want to know other people's perspectives of it, especially since it is such a heavily, demonized story, which makes sense. But I want to know other people's thoughts on it, so hopefully you can comment that if you made it this far. And hope you like it, I guess. This whole YouTube ending thing is so weird. But like and subscribe, the YouTube thing. And hopefully the next video I make is more put together. So, yeah. Thank you. Have an amazing day or night, wherever you are.